All right. We're going to be talking on this webinar today about asset management for multifamily assets. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Dan Handford with a group called PassiveInvesting.com. You can find out more information about our group by going to PassiveInvesting.com, and you can check out more information about us and our group and what we're doing by doing that. And then when you go to PassiveInvesting.com, one of the things that you can do if you're interested in investing in these types of assets passively as a limited partner or as a passive investor, you can click on the button on the top right-hand corner, click on the Join and Bet Passive Investing Club. And when you do that, there'll be a little form here you'll fill out, and then I'll jump on a one-on-one phone call with you, discuss your investment goals, and see if our group is the right fit for you. And for those of you who are joining us live, I'll type that link into the chat box so that you can join us there on the PassiveInvesting.com website. So I know there's several of you on here already that I know you are active investors in our projects, and I appreciate you for that, and looking forward to taking some future projects down with it as well. So enough about me and our group. Let's talk about this asset management. Now, I will tell you that, as you could probably already tell, and for those of you who've watched my prior webinars, I do talk really fast. And so I don't plan on slowing down during during this webinar. So I'm going to be covering a lot of different things during this webinar. And for those of you that have been with me before, I don't use a PowerPoint. So don't expect a PowerPoint, a whole nice little list or anything like that. You have to take notes. You're going to get the access to the recording of this because we are going to send out the recording usually about an hour or a couple of hours after the event, the actual webinar. Melissa, my assistant, Melissa, will actually sending out the link to everybody so that you can have the access to the recording as quickly as possible. But I'm going to go through a lot of these different things that we're going to want to have included in asset management, and then I'll open it up for some questions and answers. And again, I try to keep these to about 30 to 35 minutes in length. So let's go ahead and dive into this first topic is what is included in asset management. So let me first make the distinction between asset management and property management, because there is definitely a difference between the two. Now, one encompasses the other, but there is definitely a difference between the two. So property management is really different from asset management in the fact that property management is a separate level within asset management, which is really managing the property itself. You might even have a property management company doing this, right? That is separate from asset management. And that property management company is going to be managing the on-site staff, because usually you're going to have, if you're going to buy some of these larger assets, you can have on-site staff. If you're going some of the smaller ones, obviously you'll still have a property management company, still follows some of these same principles, but they're not going to have anybody on site. So, but our group, PassiveInvesting.com, we're only acquiring large assets. So we're going to have, large 100 plus, 200 plus unit assets. So they're going to be on-site property management on these properties. So there's going to be a leasing agent. There's going to be a property manager. There's going to be a maintenance technician. There's going to be a maintenance supervisor. So there's going to be at least probably 3 or 4 or more people on these assets that are managing the asset from the property level. And those are going to be encompassing inside of property management. But when we talk about asset management, one piece of asset management is the property management component. But we also want to talk about how are we going to find the right property management company? How are we going to be able to making sure that the property management company is actually performing and doing the things that we tell them to do? And then what are some of these KPIs, these like key performance indicators that you want to make sure that you're keeping track of on a regular basis to make sure that your property management company is actually doing the management that they're supposed to be doing for the asset. So let's first kind of go through a list of what I would say is included. And this is probably not a full encompassing list, but it's a pretty good majority of what would be included within asset management. So the first thing is collections, right? You got to make sure that the money is being collected, and then once the money is being collected, how are those being distributed out? Usually the property management company is going to be the one who's going to be managing the day-to-day expenses. So they're going to be paying for various things, whether it be the utilities for the common areas, or maybe it's going to be for the pool supplies or the pool contract, and then landscaping. And there's a lot of different contracts and things like that might happen when it comes to these assets. And they'll be the ones that'll be managing the payments to those different companies for that. But you want to make sure that in this asset management, you have somebody that is worried about collecting the money and also paying the bills at the same time. Obviously, we already talked about property management being involved with this. The next one would be maintaining the asset, making sure that the asset is being maintained to the level of specs that you want it to be maintained, so it doesn't turn into an old dilapidated property that nobody wants to rent. You want to make sure that you have inspections, right? These inspections are inspections where you actually are going to the property on a regular basis and making sure that you are actually seeing and verifying that the property management company that you have in place is actually performing the way they need to be performing. Another important piece is making sure that you look at the overall operation strategically and have that kind of, a strategic eye looking at the overall operations to do two things. You want to make sure that you can look at areas where you can decrease expenses. Again, not decreasing the quality of the operations, but improving the overall operational efficiencies to be able to decrease expenses in various areas. And there's certain things that people do on these properties when you buy them that they just don't even think about trying to, see if they can get it any cheaper. And so there's been several different things that we've found on some of the properties that we've acquired that just from a simple phone call to a vendor, you can get the price down on various things, and the quality of the service doesn't go down. It's just prices have changed and there's nobody questioning them and updated it. And so you can go in there and improve operations that way by decreasing expenses. You can also start to improve and implement technology into the property, which again allows you to sometimes even decrease the number of personnel on the property, which again is another very major value add play to be able to implement technology to be able to use fewer staff. And that allows you to have more cash flows for the property at the same time. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to improving operations is improving or increasing the revenue, right? So the ways that you can do that is that maybe there's something on the property that you have the ability to generate additional revenue from, but the property is just not capitalizing on it. And I'll give you an example. On one of our properties, we had on-site, we currently still have on-site storage. So we don't have any garage units or anything like that, but there's storage. And when we took over the property, it was 20% occupied as far as the storage. And we asked the property management, so who's leasing these things? What's the status of them? Nobody knew anything about these storage units. But come to find out, there's like 30 or 40 of them available that we can rent out. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was like, you could probably rent them out for maybe like 15, 20 bucks a month. But you take that 15, 20 bucks a month, multiply it by the number of units, and you do some specials to start to lease out those storage units, and you could increase that net operating income and the cash flows for the property, which could be very beneficial for the property itself. So those are the types of missing revenue opportunities that you have to continue to keep your eye open for. And of course, asset management, you also want to make sure that you're keeping track of the renovations. If you're buying a property and you're renovating it, you want to make sure that you're keeping track of the interior and the exterior renovations and have the schedule in place when you close to make sure that you can execute that business plan according to your underwriting. Ongoing investor updates is part of asset management. So you're managing the asset, but you're also informing the investors on what is happening on that property. One of the things that our group does is we do monthly distributions and we do monthly updates. So by the 14th of every month, investors receive an email from us that updates them on the prior performance from the prior month. And that way they know exactly how that property is performing. And that monthly update includes the good news and the bad news. So no matter what's happened on that property, we want to make sure our investors are informed. If you're in a city or a locale that allows you to do tax appeals, which you can do tax appeals just pretty much anywhere, but sometimes it doesn't really make any sense in certain states. But in some states where they do tax appeals a lot is states like Texas. Texas, there's a big tax appeal industry where because those sale prices are not shared with the local county governments, they are not they're coming up with their own valuations. And so you can go in there and hire an attorney and make sure you do tax appeals to get the tax rates down. And so that is something that is encompassed inside of asset management. And of course, you want to make sure that you are obtaining a certain number of, not a certain number, but certain reports from the property management company so you can maintain your kind of, look, if you will, your feel on you want to maintain your overall 30,000 foot view, if you will, of the actual operations. And so, it's really even more than just a 30,000 foot view, because the KPIs are really where you're going to find that 30,000 foot view, but you really want to make sure that you're receiving reports on a weekly basis. And so I'm going to give you a couple of things that I'm going to give you that are going to be some reports that we want to make sure that we look at on a regular basis. So first off, we want to get reports. These are I'm going to give you a list of these reports that we're going to look for. We want an occupancy report, which is going to include physical and economic occupancy. We want an occupancy forecast. We want to see a 30, 60, 90-day budgeted forecast for the occupancy. We want to see delinquency reports, right? We want to see a list of all the residents that are delinquent and the amounts that they're delinquent, and also potential of residences that are maybe up for becoming delinquent. Leasing reports. We want to see a summary of all leasing activity, traffic information, leasing information, concession, marketing, projections, all of that. We also want to look at accounts payable, cash on hand, income and expense reports. We want to see deposit reports, general ledger reports, balance sheets, trial balances, which that trial balance is kind of that summary of all the debits and credits, if you will. The updated rent roll, expiration reports, meaning that it's a summary of all the expiring leases. And some of these reports you wouldn't get on a weekly basis. Really, the ones that you would get more on a monthly basis are kind of like that income and expense report, the deposits, general ledger, balance sheet, trial balance, rent roll, expiration reports, and then of course the last one is maintenance reports. Those are going to be very, very key to be able to be watching those. And we're going to be talking about those when we get into the we'll be talking about that when we get into some of those KPIs that we're on to keep an eye on as well. And so I know I listed out a bunch of these reports and I talked really fast. So again, you're going to get in a recording to this so you can kind of watch, so you can kind of take a look at that. So that kind of answers that question of what is included in asset management. This is not, this is like a walk in the park. This is a lot of extra things that need to be done on the properties to maintain that asset. You know, our group actually has hired a full-time director of asset management. This is all he does, full-time basis, is manage the assets for our portfolio. And this is not something that can be done on a part-time basis. It needs to be done as full-time, hands-on efforts to make sure that the investment is being handled properly. And so now another question here is how to pick the right property management company. Well, instead of spending too much time here on the webinar talking about the different questions that you should ask and things like that, I actually did a webinar on this. I'm going to send you a link to it, but you can see the little link here. But for those of you who are watching live, I'll type it into the chat box so you can have this link. And so you can go to our YouTube channel and just type in property management or just management, and you will see this top 10 questions to ask when hiring a multifamily property management company. I did this about a little over a year ago now, but it's still applicable today. So make sure that you go there and you watch that video, which will help you and when you're trying to vet or hire a property management company. So you can do that instead of me going through that over again. So then the third question here is how often should we be talking to property managers? So I want to get a poll here of people who are on here just to kind of see what you're thinking, right? I want to kind of know what you're thinking. How often are you going to be talking to your property managers? So I want to you to go ahead and find your chat box there, type into the chat box what kind of frequency you think you should be asking them for that information. Is it daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannual, annually, beginning of the deal, end of the deal? Where do you think it should be when it comes to how often you should be talking to your property management company? So I see several of you have typed in here. Most of you have not. So you either don't know or you're just not participating. So if you're on here, I'd love for you to participate if you can and find that chat box. Don't be shy. There's no, I guess I was gonna say there's no wrong answer, but there really is a lot of wrong answers on here. But we're not gonna shame you if you get it wrong, right? So, all right, it's got a lot of people responding here. We have daily, weekly, every week, monthly, weekly, once a week, minimum monthly, weekly, monthly, quarterly, 2 or 3 times per week, as often as you can. Depends on what issues you have, but thinking bi-weekly or more often, depending on the size of the asset, monthly. So and I will tell you that it really does depend. So let me break that down just a little bit, okay? So if you have a smaller property, then you might want to do more, say, bi-weekly check-ins with them. we still do weekly check-ins with ours, because on every asset, we're checking in every single week with our property management companies. And we have scheduled phone calls every week. And I prefer to have those scheduled at the beginning of the week, because we want to set the tone for that week of what we want that property management company to be focusing on during that week. Now, if we're doing renovations, that's another reason why you want to have those weekly calls. And usually when we're doing renovations, it's usually a couple times a week that we're having conversations with the property management company to make sure that they're actually taking care of the property and performing those renovations like they should be taking care of them. Okay. And so, but if you have an asset that's been performing really well, has stabilized occupancy, you can start to taper that off, where you do bi-weekly or maybe once a month. But it's really only when that property starts to stabilize. But I will tell you that if you want to make sure that your asset is performing really well, make sure that you stay on top of your property management company. And my recommendation for you would be to have a weekly scheduled call with your property management company at the beginning of the week, Monday or Tuesday. Don't let them push you to Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, because you want to make sure that you set the tone, preferably on Monday. You set the tone for the rest of the week, because they're going to be giving you an update on how the prior week was performing. Well, how can you affect the current week if they update you on Thursday of the prior week, right? You can't. They're already end of the next week. So you want to make sure that you have that feedback and you give them that input at the beginning of the week on how that property is performing, and so that you can make some of those high-level decisions as you're going throughout the rest of the week. I do the same thing in my clinics. I have 4 non-surgical orthopedic medical clinics that I own, and each one of those we have a weekly meeting every single week to make sure that we can set the tone for the rest of the week. If you do those on Fridays, guess what happens? The weekend happens, they get back on Monday, and they forgot what you talked about at the meeting. So my recommendation is to try to do weekly calls, preferably on Monday. And if you have to, you can push them to Tuesday, but preferably on Monday. All right. Somebody's asking if I'm sharing any deck. No, I am not sharing any deck. I am going off the top of my head. This is all off the top of my head. And of course, I have a few lists that I'm going off of, some notes that I made beforehand. So, all right. We're going to go through some of these top KPIs that we should be keeping track of. And in these top KPIs that I'm going to go over with you, I am going to, let me see here. Let me pull up my other sheet here, out my other thing of notes. The other thing that you're going to be doing is keeping track of various KPIs. And so there should be an email that they send you on a weekly basis with the reports that you want to see. And then also a KPI tracker that you can put together, right? It's a tracker that allows you to keep track of, each one of your assets, or if that property management company has multiple assets, but at least the one asset that they are managing, and these various things that they can keep track of that you want to see trending as well. And so, you're going to want to see total traffic, right? That's going to be an important KPI to keep track of, is total traffic. Total traffic is going to be the number of leads that the property received, the number of showings of the property that the property did during that prior week, and then also the net leases that they received from the traffic during that prior week. You're also going to want to look at the financials. You want to have, the month-to-date rents, RUBS, the total of both of those things, the month-to-date collections, any delinquencies, expenses, income, all of that month-to-date can be sending to them on that weekly basis. And then, of course, lease expirations with the net exposure that you're going to have. So you want to have the month-to-month lease, all the residents that are on month-to-month leases, because those are going to be important to understand, renovation timelines and, where you can actually push rents or potentially, move some people from a month-to-month lease to permanent leases. If they don't want to do that, then you can move another resident in there that might be on a waiting list. You can also have lease expiration exposure. Basically, that's through the end of the month, through the end of next month. So kind of like that 30, 60, 90-day view, if you will, on lease expirations. And then any move-ins that are scheduled. Those are going to be some additional KPIs you want to keep track of, are the move-ins. So ones that are happening in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 30+ days, et cetera. Keeping track of those. And then, of course, not just the move-ins, but the move-outs. You want to keep track of the move-outs that are happening over that 1, 2, 3 week, 3, 4+, and then the 4+ week time frames as well. Any type of what are called new evictions or any evictions that are in progress and what those statuses of those are. And then of course, what we call skips. And skips are when the resident basically just picks all their stuff up and walks off and you can't communicate with them anymore. It's called a skip. Somebody who they kind of evicted themselves, but you can't reach them right now. And that's actually happened quite a bit in COVID-19 era, in that I've heard several properties that have had a lot of their residences that just basically turned in their keys and left. And so they didn't fulfill the rest of their obligations of their lease, but they did leave the unit so you could actually, get it ready again to be able to lease up. And of course, the number of ready units. So the number, if you're doing renovations, you want to see how many of those units are totally vacant, that are rent ready, or are under renovations, or are rent ready and renovated, right? So you can keep track of those, and also the number of vacants that were completed, meaning that if you have ones that are not able to be shown, even though that they're vacant, how many of those are vacant right now, and how many of them are showable now, right? And keeping a track of those trends. And then, of course, we wanted to keep track of maintenance requests. And these maintenance requests are going to be maintenance requests that have to do with anything that's pending, right? How many are pending? How many have been received? How many did they complete during that particular week? And then how many are pending in the current week? So ones that have been outstanding for more than a week are the ones that are handled during that week. And again, this allows you to kind of see an entire snapshot of how that property management company is performing as well. You also want to have one that gives you an idea as to how many applications are in the hopper. So not just net leases, but how many are pending applications, how many have been approved, and then of course like the total of applications that you received during that week, because you might receive 10 or 20 applications, but only 5 of them get approved. And so you want to keep track of that as well, so you can also potentially modify some of your marketing at the same time. And let's see. Of course, another KPI that you want to keep track of is any type of incidents that have happened on the property, so you can be apprised of that. And then, of course, any type of lease violations that have been sent on the property at the same time. And then, of course, you want to have an overall summary, right? You want to see occupancy, physical occupancy. You want to see leased, not leased. You want to see how many are the number of units that are available, last week occupied, new skips, moved out, moved in. How many are occupied this week? Any physical vacancies? You want to see net leases, pre-leased, leased vacant, notice to vacates that are available. So there's a lot of these different KPIs that. And you need to work closely with your property management company, because your property management company should have some form of tracking to send you like that on a regular basis, whether it be an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF report that gives you a lot of this data. But you can sit down with them and say, hey, these are the things that I want to see to make sure that you are actually handling and performing the property in the way that I want you to be handling them. And so those are going to be very important reports to be able to make sure that the on-site property management company or property manager is actually filling out and handing to you on a regular basis. So let me open it up now to some questions and answers. And I know you have some questions because I've seen a couple of them already come through here. So let me go up here just a quick second here and see if I can find any questions that have come in. We'll take probably about another 10 minutes or so to answer some questions to keep it to that 30, 35-minute time frame. All right. So does the asset manager, this is coming from Bob, does the asset manager make final decisions to accept a tenant or decision to evict? So yes, not the asset manager is not usually the one who makes those final decisions. They can, kind of overturn certain decisions that have been made, but usually the decision to accept a tenant or to evict a tenant is going to be given to the property management company to be able to handle that, because there's going to be certain criteria that they're already going to have in place. And you can work with them to modify some of that criteria, but you don't want to have to be worrying about approving a tenant or evicting a tenant on a regular basis, especially if you have a property that has over 200 units. I mean, that would be a little bit cumbersome for you to have to keep on doing that on a regular basis. All right, let's see here. Niraj was asking, when it comes to leveraging add-on services to increase revenue, decrease costs, for example, the on-site storage, who typically executes the marketing to drive incremental utilization? So that marketing is going to be driven by the property management company. So when we saw that the on-site storage units were not being marketed, we brought it to the attention of the property management company and said, hey, listen, we bought this property. It has on-site storage. What's the status of it? And once we figured out the status of it, we're like, listen, we got to start marketing this thing. And so it's a dialogue back and forth with the property management company to see what they think that they can rent those things out for. So if it's $25 a month, we can say, well, let's run a special for the next 30 days that anybody who wants to rent those storage units will do it for $20 a month, right? Or we'll give it to them free for the first month or 2 months or something like that to get them using that storage unit to be able to increase that. But that's going to be done by the property management company. And there's also ways to incentivize the property management on site to be able to do certain things, but their incentive is to keep your business, right? And so you want to make sure that you're having those decisions making those decisions with the property management company, because you want them to be on board. And if they're not on board with your decisions, then guess what? It's going to be a lot harder for them to actually maintain and be able to do that, implement some of those strategies and high-level things that you want to do. Bob is asking, is renovation the responsibility of an asset manager or with a project manager? I was thinking only refresh would be responsible for the asset manager. So again, I want to make sure we're clear here is that the asset manager would be like you as the operator, right? And so the property manager who is the on-site is going to be the one who's going to be helping manage the asset, it's managing the renovations. And so it can go a couple of different ways. So there are some property management companies that pretty much do that for you. And there are some property management companies that say, we'll help with certain things, but we're not getting paid, so we're not going to do that. You have to manage the manager. And so you have to have a project manager that actually is there and helping with that. So one of the things that we've done is we've worked very closely with our property management company to kind of negotiate the fees for construction management, if you will, into their property management fee. And so instead of being charged an extra 5% for a construction management fee, they are helping us with it on a very small scale, but it's incorporated in their fee, if you will. But there are some additional things that we have to do from the asset management level to make sure that we're maintaining relationships with the vendors, especially if you have a really large vendor that's doing the renovations for your entire project. You want to make sure that you have that conversation and that dialogue with them on a regular basis. And so the regular refreshes, if you will, like you're calling them, Bob, would be when a resident leaves and you're not going to renovate it, we're just going to go in there and kind of turn it for the next resident to come lease it. That would definitely be for the property management on site who's going to be managing those types of terms. Let's see here. Please comment on having periodic in-unit inspections. So in-unit inspections should be done by the on-site maintenance team, and that should be done on at least a 90-day rolling basis. So at least every 90 days, somebody on site should be walking that unit to make sure that it's being taken care of properly. Are you able to recover lost revenue from skips for not filling their financial obligations? So, and this is coming from Bridget. Yes, Bridget, there are ways to do that. With the whole COVID-19 situation, a lot of times that has not been being done because they don't have a job. And so it's been hard to kind of get that revenue, but you can continue to try to recover that. But you could also, usually if somebody skips, there's also a deposit that they put down, which is usually the first month's rent, or even the first and last month's rent. And that would be something that they wouldn't get paid back if they were a skip. That would just be additional revenue for the property because of that skip and turning their keys in. James is asking, are the reports issued to you via a CRM or any technology tools that you prefer? So a lot of these reports are standard reports that are in any property management software that is out there. So there's 2 different ways to get these reports. You can either give the list at the very beginning when you close on a property to the property management company and say, these are the reports that I want to see on a weekly basis, and these are the reports I want to see on a monthly basis. Or you can ask them to just give you access to the property management software so you can go in there and pull those reports yourself. I prefer to actually get them to email it to us because I don't want them just to spit me on a report, right? I want them to spit me out the report and give you some background and some feedback about that report. I don't want to have to be the one going through those reports if I don't have to. I mean, I still want to be able to have the access to do that, but I want to see the report and I want to see an explanation of maybe what some of the things that they see, good or bad, on that property. How do you feel? James is asking, this is a different James, asking about how do you feel about unannounced visits to the property? I like them. I like them quite a bit. I think that doing secret shopping or doing unannounced visits to the property is very, very good. And you should incorporate that in your overall asset management strategy. One of the things I would suggest is making sure when you go to the property, you have a checklist. You have a checklist of things that you're going to look for that are out of place and that could potentially need to be improved upon, and go over that with your property management company. Vincent is asking, can you expect that most management companies will have a software system with all this information already? So I would not hire a property management company unless they had a software that allowed them to spit out this information. So if they don't, they're not going to be big enough for me to want to deal with them. I want to make sure that they have this kind of software at their fingertips so they can keep track of it. Because I don't want them to just be managing my asset like it's a smaller mom and pop property. I want to be making sure that they are an institutional quality property management company and providing these institutional level reports as well. Corey is asking, on top of your KPIs, what are the return metrics that you send in your monthly updates for your private owner assets under management? Are the monthly reports any different? Let's see. No. So as far as the private owner assets, the monthly reports are not any different. I still want to have those. And then as far as the monthly updates that I'm giving to my investors, it's primarily just occupancy levels, right? I want them to know kind of how the property is performing from an occupancy level standpoint. And then of course, giving them renovation updates, timelines, pictures, and then market news and various things like that. I don't really want to overwhelm my investors. I want to make sure that they have that data. And then on a quarterly basis, I do provide them with the T12 and the rent roll. So that way they can actually see what the actual profit and losses are on the property, where the money's being spent, how they're getting their distributions, and also the rent roll so they can verify who's actually being on there and stuff. So Winston's asking, who pays for staffing, PTO, paid time off, or vacation time? So when you have a large property, you have on-site property management, you're going to have the property management company that you've hired, and they're going to charge you a fee. These larger properties are going to have fees anywhere between about 3 to 5%. But you're going to still be paying the salaries of the on-site people. And so any expenses, whether it be workers' comp, sick time, paid leave, or anything like that, is going to be paid for at the property level. So the property is going to be paying for that through the property management company. So you're not going to be, as the property, hiring these people. They'll be hired by the property management company, but all the expenses related to those employees will be passed on to the property. Bob is asking, do you do tenant surveys about the property management and their experiences living at the property? So yes, we do. So usually on an annual basis, we'll give them that, but we'll also give it to them on called an entry survey, and then also a exit survey. So how they actually, how the property performed, or how they felt about the property after they left the property. And then one level up from that, Bob, that I would suggest that you do is that anytime you have your on-site maintenance team go and fix something at a unit or anything like that, give them a survey of how that maintenance, the ticket, was taken care of as well. Because that'll also give you some insights onto how that property is actually performing as well. So let me go over to my Q&As here. I have some Q&As that have come in as well. I've been going through my chat box here. If you are a smaller investor, you own 1 to 2 apartment buildings and you manage them yourself, let's say 20 units total, what software would you recommend to manage and track everything? I know there's several different property management softwares out there. I have not, because we don't manage that small of a units. Does anybody on the webinar have any suggestions that you could maybe make? And I'll mention them to Lotus here. So Corey is saying there's one called Stessa, Stessa, Stessa. So if there's anybody else that's out there on the webinar here and wants to mention to Lotus, you can let me know and I'll mention it out there. There's also one called Rent Manager. Yes, I have actually heard of that one, Jerome, called Rent Manager. That's another one. There's also, Bill said he's run into one called TRDI, I guess Triddy. Oh, Yardi, sorry, Yardi, Yardi. I'm not sure if Yardi would be best for a smaller unit property, but I know that some of our properties do use the Yardi software, and it does work really well. I just haven't done any research on it to see if it's done really well for some of these smaller properties. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. Probably of those that I've seen there, the one for the smaller properties I've seen the most is probably Rent Manager that I've actually seen. So thank you everybody who are live here and helping us out here. Thank you for that question. What should the payroll look like for a 100 unit property, employee count and average salary? So on a 100 unit property, you're going to probably see anywhere between about 3 to 4 people on that property. And the salary is going to depend because it's going to depend on the actual market itself. So it's hard to answer that question. But on a 100 unit property, you're going to see anywhere between 3 to 4 count of people on that property. I would say most cases you're going to probably see close to 4 people on those properties. And but you definitely want to work with the property management company that has experience with average salaries in that market, so you get a good because you get some good data on what it's going to cost you when you take over that property. Does the asset manager give the monthly NOI targets to meet to the PM? So absolutely, this is a great topic to talk about because you want to make sure that your property management company from the very beginning is on board and helps you set those various targets so that you can say, can you perform this way? And let's make sure it gets that way, right? Once we close on the property. So you definitely want to make sure that they're involved in the conversations about what those monthly and yearly and quarterly NOI targets are. Let's see. Bobby's asking, how do you differentiate a good property manager from a bad property manager? I'll defer you, Bobby, to that webinar that I did about a year ago, a little over a year ago, then the link that I sent in there for those of you to watch that, because I think that will answer those questions for you instead of taking the time during this webinar to answer that. So I'll type it in here to the chat box again for those of you who want to watch that one on the property management companies. So what about anything that breaks the bill gets sent to you as the asset manager or the company management or the management company has a reserve account for those repairs? So we prefer to keep the capital account on our side instead of you having the property management company use that. And so if there is any large expenses, we know about them up front and we can pay for them out of our capital account. So if anything gets really, really high bill or something like that, it has to get approved by the asset manager. And then we actually can pay for that out of the capital or the reserves account if we need to. All right, so looks like we have one more question in here. There's a couple more in here, but I'm going to take one more question in here, and then we will go. We'll actually see. So Jerome's asking, I'm trying to go through a couple of these questions to see if I can answer some of these quickly, but there's a couple of them that are going to be a little more detailed. So I apologize, I'm not going to be able to get to all of your questions, but Jerome's asking here, what are the top 3 things you want to hear from your property manager to know the property is doing well? You know, I would say the occupancy is one of the biggest things. The occupancy, and I would say the maintenance request, because I want to make sure our maintenance team is taking care of the asset in a timely fashion, because one way you will decrease your turnover is not taking care of the maintenance requests that the residents submit. So making sure that that's on top of things. But also, I would say one of the top 2 things is your current occupancy and then your budgeted occupancy. So budgeted occupancy are going to be your occupancies that are going to be the occupancies that are coming up in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And then our projected occupancy, based on your current notices to vacate and renewals and things like that. And then also you're keeping track of that budgeted occupancy. Here's the budgeted occupancy. Here's the occupancy of where we are right now currently. And here's the trend over the next 30, 60, 90 days. And your property management company should be able to keep track of that on a regular and consistent basis. So. All right. Well, I want to thank each one of you for being here on the webinar. It's been great. A lot of content in here. Like I said before, we'll be sending out the recording over the next couple of hours here so you can have access to the recordings. And for those of you who have not done it yet, make sure you go to the mfinsummit.com and register for the next summit that's coming up. You just go to mfinsummit.com, mfinsummit.com. That's coming up in June 11th, 12th, and 13th. And if you watch this video after June, you can go there and find out about the next one that'll be scheduled in January of 2021. And so let me refresh my screen here and see if this topic is updated. It is. Things are working well. The next topic for next week is going to be assuming a multifamily loan for apartment syndication. So if you're curious about that topic and you want some more information, make sure that you go there to the website, go to multifamilyinvestornation.com/MFIN webinar. And you can, I typed into the chat box for those of you who want to go ahead and register for next week's webinar. It's already listed there next Thursday, May 28th at 12 p.m. Eastern. So thank you so much for your time and looking forward to seeing you in here next week.